Do you want to learn the tools and strategies that can propel you to the next level in life? Do you want to understand how to maximize your fullest potential? Since 2001, Empower You has impacted and changed the lives of tens of thousands of people from around the world. And now we bring the life-changing experience to you. So welcome to the Empower You podcast with Brent and Byron Dempsey, the podcast that delves into the ins and outs of the Empower You program and gives you a behind-the-scenes glimpse into what really goes on at these life-changing events.
Brent, welcome to the Empower You podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Very excited. This has been, a lot of work, a long time in the waiting. So this episode is going to be an introduction to what this podcast is all about. We're still figuring out ourselves, but we're going to be talking, the program after the program. So for either people who are interested in coming along or people who've attended and want to have that education continued while they're driving, while they're at school, whatever, this is what this podcast is designed for. But did you just want to quickly break down a little bit about who you are, what the Empower You program is, and what you've kind of achieved over the past 20 years?
Sure, yeah. So Empower You is Australia's leading personal development and life skills program for teenagers. It began in October of 2001. And it came about, how it all began for me was I was, I suppose you would consider a top achiever at school. I did quite well academically. I was quite athletic. Great friends, great family, strong ambitions for my future. I had a life-changing experience shortly after my HSC. I was robbed at gunpoint, thought I was going to die. And I suppose in many ways, I know you've probably heard this line before, my life flashed before my eyes. All the things from my past that has shaped who I was. But I suppose more importantly, all the things that I wanted to do but hadn't done yet. My big dream in life was to be a movie director. My hero, Steven Spielberg. I love storytelling. And that, prior to that incident, was somewhat of a pipe dream for me, I suppose you would say. But that really was an experience that shifted my thinking and made me make a firm decision that I wanted to really have a life that was on my terms. And I didn't want to have a life of any regret. So I realized that I didn't have all of the life skills that I felt I needed to pursue this dream. So I went along to a wealth creation seminar. It was a 4-day event, cost me just over $5,000. Yeah. Oof. And for an 18-year-old, that's a huge amount of money.
It's crazy. I actually, before I met you, I did the public speaking event, 6 days,
Yes.
$5,000 as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm selling stuff, I'll be like, oh, do kids have money? I'm like, I spent $5,500 when I was like 19. And so did you.
Yeah.
It's as you mentioned, it's seeing the value and not the cost.
Totally. I think, I always say the greatest investment you can make is in yourself. And too often, as you just mentioned, people focus on the cost as opposed to the value. And, I knew I was making an investment myself. So I didn't look at the dollars up front. I looked at the return I would get, both financially and also personally. So I went along to this course, and I was the youngest person by 20 years. It's probably about 200 people in the room. And the first 3 days was called The Psychology of Money. Sounded really cool. Didn't know what it meant. Sounded good. So essentially, it was just another fancy term for personal development. And again, I was always confident. I didn't feel I had any insecurities or major past traumas to overcome. But this experience was the greatest thing I'd ever done in my life. Like truly, I remember finishing it so vividly. I remember finishing it with tears in my eyes, saying, oh my gosh, I just feel so incredible about myself and so clear on my future direction. Like I can't tell you the rocket fuel that was running through my veins. And so many of the other participants who were in their late 30s, late 40s, even late 50s, came up to me at the end with tears in their eyes saying, I wish I had this at your age. What different decisions would I have made in my life had I been exposed to this information as a teenager? And so I joined that company full time and immersed myself in the environment for about 9 months. And every course was the same story. And so I just made a decision, why don't I run a program like this for young people like me? And so that's where it all began. And we ran our first Empower You program in July of 2002. We had 43 participants attend that. I somehow convinced parents to send their kids along. My promise was a life-changing experience, but I was just backing myself at this point, and my hope that the audience would have the same impact on them as it did on me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And the big concerns up until that point were a lot of objections from adults who knew what I was trying to do were, well, they're not paying for themselves. So they made no financial commitment. Well, yeah, that's true. They haven't gone through the life experiences yet, so they're not really seeing the value of the breakthroughs you're talking about.
They can't appreciate what you're talking about because they haven't suffered or like experienced that.
Exactly, yes. And their attention span may be too short to sustain their attention for 13-hour days. Yeah, so look, I was naive enough and optimistic enough to think, it's going to work. It'll work for me, it'll work for them. And that's important. I think that's one big benefit of youth is the naivety.
I agree. And I spoke about this with my mate who's a musician, and he's just like, I think he's 30 now, and he's just like, if I had known how hard it was to make it as a musician, I never would have started. I was just hopelessly naive. And I'm like the same with the podcasts for younger people. Younger people don't listen to podcasts. They're starting to now, but not when I started. I didn't realize that. And it's like, that's whole dream, struggle, prize, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, I do think there is a beauty in like just being hopelessly naive and just starting something.
Yeah. Well, because then you don't have all those reasons why it won't work.
Exactly.
And you don't have all those doubts. You just go and do it. And, I'm always a big advocate of life rewarding action. It's funny, my wife was always confused about that. What does that mean, Brent, life rewards action? Well, it just simply means that in the game of life, you treat life as a game and you want to achieve success in that game, you want to win that game, the way of winning it and being successful in it is just to take action, to do something. We so get stuck in our thoughts thinking about the decision. Just make the decision and do it. You'll either get the result you want or you'll learn a lesson.
Yeah. And not making a decision is a decision.
100%.
You've made a decision to not make a decision. So if you're going to make a decision, make it a good one.
Yeah. I like that one. I feel like doing an and so we ran the first course and, I was so nervous. I remember having nightmares for weeks leading up to it. I was listening to Tony Robbins CDs in the car on the way there, just reminding myself of some of the key points that I want to share. And I was umming and ahhing my way through the first few hours. The audience kind of laughed at the first section, thought it was silly, not serious. But of course it ended amazingly. And since then, we've had almost 30,000 people go through that weekend experience in 6 countries. And really the program is designed to fill in the gaps in young people's education, to give them the tools and strategies not always focused on in school. So areas like emotional intelligence, creativity, money and finance, communication skills, goal setting, gratitude, health and nutrition, but really to do it in a very fun and interactive way. I'm acutely aware that the majority of the people that come to Empower You don't want to be there. Because they don't know what it's about. They have an idea. They think, is it kind of like a school camp?
Yeah.
Is it like school?
Especially if they've never done personal development before. There's nothing to be excited about.
Yeah.
Because all your past experiences are probably something that it's like a bit of a chore to go to.
Yes.
Like even camp can be a bit of a chore to go to sometimes. And it's, and especially when they find out it's 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night. They're like, what? My entire weekend? Like your entire weekend is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of negative stuff if you don't know anything about the program.
And, that's been the biggest challenge in my 20 years of running Empower You is bridging the gap between the perception of the weekend and the reality. The closer we can get these, the bigger the program's going to be. Because if people really knew the magnitude of Empower You and how they'd feel attending it, we'd be doing it in sporting stadiums every weekend, sold out forever.
I think because the website doesn't do it justice. Nothing does it justice. You can't. We've got all this amazing footage, but none of it does it justice. Like you can't feel the energy in the room. You can't. When I talk about people to it, I'm like, oh, it's so great, it's so great. They're like, oh, I'd love to come. A lot of my friends want to come and stuff, but it's hard to capture that and put it out there unless you've done it. And also, as you've mentioned, and we're kind of moving away from them now. There is magic and the secrecy behind it.
Yeah.
But we've kind of had to, I guess, let go as we scale.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you've made there. Is there was always the balance, striking the balance between keeping the magic of the event contained in the surprise, but also giving enough to show people how great it will be. It's kind of like, you watch a movie trailer and, the movie trailers in the 70s, right? If you ever, my favorite movie of all time is Jaws. If you actually go on YouTube and type in Jaws trailer, it is awful. Like, compared to today's standards, how you cut that trailer together, it's awful. It's like, he attacks from water, Jaws. And it's like really cheesy.
It's like
and
that deep voice. It's like, coming to your cinemas.
Yeah. It's going to bite your head off and stuff. It was so cheesy. But in saying that, it didn't give away the story. It didn't give away. Now, you watch a trailer, after 3 minutes, I know I know the ups and the downs. I know the hero's journey there. I know the problem they've got to solve. And so you're like, I just kind of watched the movie now.
Well, do you know what's funny you say? I don't know if you watch much Marvel, but there's a new Spider-Man movie coming out.
Yeah.
And they're not posting the trailer. First time ever. So the brothers have said, we're not going to post a trailer because we think we just want there to be a surprise. We want there to be magic in it.
I love that.
And so, because the Spider-Man trailers, like, I don't know if you saw Infinity War trailer, but you see Spider-Man get hit with a suit. Now you know he's going to have that suit. So that was spoiled.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
all this stuff was happening. I was so hyped by it. And you can't not watch it.
Yeah.
If they release it, I'll watch it.
And see, that's the smart thing. I think they're probably going in there going, okay, look, we've already got a very built-in audience. We'll probably get a guaranteed $50 million opening just because it's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And the mystery of it, because no one's ever done that, at least in recent years, this could actually be the new way of going about things. So that's really interesting. I want to go see it now.
Yeah.
Because you haven't seen it. It's like that, the mystery of that. We overexpose everything now. So that's really cool. But yeah, I mean, that was always the balance with Empower You. I wanted to protect the integrity of the magic of what we do. And then that goes for the camps that we run as well. Like, imagine we showcased what we actually did there.
Well, half the best processes at camp, it has to be a secret.
Yeah, it has to be.
Like,
it wouldn't work if you knew.
like stuff we do in Empower You, it's great to know if it's a secret, but you're still going to get a lot out of it. But some of these processes, like, it just doesn't, it's not going to work if everyone in the group knows what's happening.
Well, that's right.
It literally won't work.
Yeah, no. And so, for me now, I really see Empower You needing to be an integral part of every young person's education. I mean, I always felt that when I started it, but it was one of those like, I've got this big vision of changing the world. It all sounds nice. But 20 years into this, that's more real than ever before in a time where it's more needed than ever before.
sure.
I can tell you right now, and it's sad to say this, but it's true, my audience haven't got stronger in 20 years. They've gotten more delicate. They've gotten more fragile. They quit more. They struggle with confrontation more because we are given way more exits than ever before. Tough love is not used nearly as much as it should be. It's all about nurturing. And, we always talk about the whole caterpillar butterfly thing. We'll probably share that story multiple times on this podcast, but it's so true. If you don't go through a struggle in life, how do you earn the prize?
Yeah.
You've got to build resilience to be able to deal with challenges. And boy, do we have a challenge on our hand right now as a human race. So
to give a bit of clarity, like, we're filming this in the midst of Sydney lockdown. This should be the last lockdown. We're trying to get vaccine rates up, but it's just crazy right now. So, and young people are struggling. Everyone's struggling. Yeah. But I know young people are specifically struggling because they're going, these are supposed to be the best years of my life, according to what I've been grown up to be told. I'm entering my 20s. My cousin's 18th birthday next week. What are they doing? Nothing.
Yeah.
They can't do anything.
Yeah.
Have a Zoom.
Yeah.
How depressing is that?
Yeah.
I had my 21st during lockdown and all these things that young people are just going, oh. And even before lockdown, honestly, people were barely traveling and doing a lot of stuff anyway. So, yeah, I do think it's more needed now than ever before because we're more connected than ever, but we're also more disconnected. Yeah. And we'll do a lot of talk about social media throughout this podcast, but I'll just see that in there because, and that's half the reason I'm starting this Gap Year project, which I'm sure I'll talk about a bit more, but just to connect people. And that's probably, we talk about a lot of great stuff at Empower You, but probably the best thing is just bringing a great group of young people into a room together and giving them a free space to, be open and have great conversations.
I think what it's repeatedly showed me over the years, and it was not my initial intention, and that's, I think, the beauty of these things sometimes is you get things you weren't expecting, is how much happiness is shared. And when you can create a space where people feel comfortable and in rapport with one another, all we want to do is feel love and be loved. And if we feel that connection, that's all we really need. Yep. That's all we really need. And that's achieved in 2 days. It's quite a significant thing to show you how quickly people can change their state. I mean, I guess the nature of these podcasts is you jump around in topics. Yeah. And so I guess that'll, I'll get better at keeping on topic. But, the amount of students that I've had over the years, and let me preface this by saying I designed this program for me. So I designed this, when I wrote this program, I thought I'm writing this program for people that want a great life, that are seeking to do things different.
People are here and want to go here.
Yes. Yeah. But want to do that, not forced, want to. But the reality of doing a program for young people is I accept that I also attract parents that are desperate because they're looking for some sort of shift with their child who's having whatever challenges, whether they're depressed, whether they're lacking quality friendships, whether they're not very clear on what they want to do with their lives, what a plethora of reasons because their child's struggling. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've had 14, 15, 16-year-olds that have been in therapy for years, that have had suicidal thoughts, that have cut themselves, that in just a weekend, by creating the right environment where people feel loved, they will say, I feel better about myself just from this weekend than years and years of therapy. And it just shows me that when you create a space of love, which you've already touched on, but you also have tough love, like you tell it how it is. And this is another thing. I think a lot of parents think that they need to be friends all the time. I've got to make sure my kids love me and I've got to let them have their choice and give them that freedom. And I think that's an absolute disservice because I know when you create boundaries, like when we create boundaries that empower you, and even at the camp, when there are boundaries and there's consequences for actions, people love that. People ultimately love to know their boundaries, how far they can go with it. I mean, kids test boundaries all the time. They're working out how far can I go with this? How far can I go with that? What are my limitations? People like that structure. And so when you can create clear structure and parameters, rewards and punishments, consequences for actions in a loving space, people thrive. People thrive. And we just need more of that.
It's just insane. Like, some of the testimonials you get at the end when people share their best things. And there's one, you weren't in the room. This was the first time we did it when you were with the parents and I was doing the UR process, which we'll talk about, debrief with Jack. And one girl, I don't know how old she was, I'd guess 14, was just like, I never get hugged at home. I never get this sort of stuff at home. I've just had more love in my entire life in that last 20 minutes than I have in my entire life. And you're just like, it's beautiful, but it's also sad.
It's sad. It's super sad. And it's also super revealing, isn't it? I mean, when I hear these things, and I've been running this for 20 years, and I remember when you told me that, I was like, really? What's wrong with these parents? Or what's wrong with the child's perception? Because sometimes, like you hear a participant say that, is that the truth or is that just their version of it and how they've seen it? So I'm always very mindful that there's two sides to it. But regardless, that's what she feels, that's what she believes, that's her truth. And it's incredible to me how many people are just craving simple things like that cost nothing for anyone to give.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got two kids. I've got an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I hug them every day. I randomly go up, I just kiss them on the head, I love you. I just constantly reinforce. Now, in saying that, I don't mollycoddle them. Like, my wife and I are tough with them. We create boundaries. We're like, this is what we expect of you. But in saying that, you can never give enough love. And it's amazing how many people, like you just said, like, it's so sad. It's so sad. And it's such an easy thing to solve.
Yeah. It's just... people just don't want to do it. Well, I think, no, wrong. That's wrong. They think they do want to do it. They're just uncomfortable and the space isn't there.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these kids, they want to do that. They want to dance and everyone always ends up dancing. Everyone wants to do this stuff, but it's just forcing them to with, creating the space that they can do it in. I just think the other thing before we wrap up and touching on Empower You is I think it's 2 days of their life, but it can have such a big impact. It's like, let's say you get nothing out of Empower You. You've lost 2 days of your life. Who cares? Like the risk reward, like the reward is so high and the risk is so low for Empower You. And if you people leave, if they hate it, we'll give them a refund. It's like, great, you've lost no money. All they've lost is a day or 2 days of their life. But the potential reward is a huge shift, friendships for life. All these new thoughts coming in. And so I think for me it's a no-brainer. Why would you not do this? And as you mentioned, we're not charging $5,000 like we paid for these other courses. Yeah. It's incredibly affordable and incredibly accessible to anyone in Australia.
And I think, ultimately what this boils down to and why we're doing this podcast is, I met you a year ago.
Almost to the day, yeah.
Yeah, a year ago. That's crazy. And a year ago, like just down the road. Yeah. It's so funny how far we've come in a year. But what it comes down to and what we're trying to do with this podcast is develop people's mindset. Because the right mindset will win every time. What we're talking about here is mindset. We're talking about what's your mindset? Is your mindset, oh my gosh, a whole weekend, I'm not going to be able to go party and do all these things. I'm going to listen to someone talk to me. Or is your mindset, wow, I'm going to invest a weekend listening to someone who's been doing this for 20 years, has had thousands of people go through this course, all saying it's life-changing. That's mindset. That's just the way you see the world. And that's something we want to cultivate on this podcast. We want to talk about the psychology of why we do what we do, why we are the way we are, and how we can change the things that don't serve us to instill more empowering beliefs that give us the life that we want. Simple to understand, hard to master.
Yeah. I think mindset is, such a big part, and that's always the worry after Empower You is, are they going to maintain that mindset? Which is again why we want to start this podcast. You've done the program, whether you want to do the program or whatever it is, there's going to be beneficial stuff in this podcast. There's that quote, it's like whether you think you can or whether you think you can't. You're right.
Yeah. And now let's just quickly talk about some of the things we will be talking about on this podcast. I certainly want to break down the entire program.
Yeah.
So we'll certainly cover the 6 pillars, maybe in one hit, and then we'll break them up and really dive deep. Because I know you and I have talked about the belief section, for example, where we talk about the table and legs as a metaphor, and there's so much to say about that, and really to unpack and break it down. So we want to do that. We really want to break down the entire weekend. We also want to expand on some of the ideas that we've covered in Empower You. For sure. I want to talk about money and finance.
Oh man, we could do so much on money and finance.
I really want to talk about business.
Yep.
I want to talk about careers. I want to talk about toxic relationships. I want to talk about hugging.
And networking.
Networking.
A big one as well.
Huge one. I mean, and look, you're such a great example of that, but I have so much thoughts around that because your network is everything. And your network is not even just about you getting to where you want to go. It's about cultivating mindset.
Yeah.
It's cultivating mindset. It's who you surround yourself with on a regular basis.
I don't even like saying network because it feels very transactional.
Yes,
like relationships.
yes, relationships.
Yeah, business relationships.
Yeah,
Or even like
yeah.
a lot of my friends, there's no direct benefit, but there's benefits like this Gap Year project. I ran the information night last weekend. Half my friends joined. They're all keen to help and get involved. Like that means so much to me.
Yeah.
And it means I can, you can run this, you can help us with this. It means, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about network, we could call it tribe, we could call it family, friends, entourage,
whatever you want to call it.
But I'm just going to come back to Empower You again. How often, and I know you've only been around it for a year now, but how often have you heard people at the end of the program say, I was more open and honest with these people I just met over the last 2 days than my friends my entire life?
Every single program.
Yeah. Yeah. And what it does is it gives them a reference to go, this is what life should be like.
Yes.
This is how I should interact with my friends. I shouldn't be fearful of saying something because I'm going to be judged, or someone's going to post something on Snapchat or Instagram, and I'm going to get, this is how I should be able to freely speak about how I feel, and have that reciprocated, and for people to be open and honest and authentic. And it's amazing how, I remember someone in the program, a boy said, I love the hugs. If I did this at school, my friends would call me gay.
Yeah. That's classic.
And it's sad that, and you're talking about earlier about, people want to give love, but they just worry about how to do it. It's almost like we have such a fear of rejection. We have such a fear of rejection and judgment. And technology has only amplified that fear of judgment, because judgment is not just one-on-one now, it can be one-to-many.
Yeah.
And so when we think about the battle in life, and we're seeing this right now on a global scale, there's a battle going on between fear and love. And it feels like fear is winning right now. And what we're trying to do with this podcast is amplify love. And so I'm really excited to dive into all of those topics. And also for the people that have done Empower You before, I'd love to unpack some of the greatest stories.
Yeah.
I'd love to unpack some of the most crazy things that have happened, the big mistakes.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff, I guess, because you've been training me up as a speaker for the past year. I see all the behind the scenes, the psychology that goes behind it. We can talk about that stuff. See, I think it's going to be really exciting for people who have attended the program. We're going to be unpacking into a lot more detail of comfort zones is 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I could talk about that for hours.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack in just that one thing. Funny stories, best wins, your lowest points, when you've had to evacuate buildings, all the best things and the worst things that have happened throughout the program.
I mean, I'd even love to talk about things like, why do I say things like, who's following my conversation?
Yeah.
And what's a game we're playing team? And if you know, you know.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the magician revealing the magic tricks. Because I think it's I think it's going to be very revealing for participants to understand that, and to walk on that journey. I think what it'll do is, it's almost like when I started to become a filmmaker, I appreciated movies a lot more.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so unpacking the psychology of Empower You, I hope for those that have attended the course that do follow this podcast, they go, wow, now I understand so much of the thinking that went on to that. So they'll have a greater appreciation for what they've experienced, and hopefully the ultimate goal of all of this is that you all apply what you learn. I remember watching one of your podcasts. You're talking to someone about like favorite books, and you're talking about Atomic Habits, and you were saying, it's interesting. I read that book. There's so many lessons, but have I implemented it?
Yeah. It's such a good point, and that's the whole empower you thing. And I think that's where this podcast is ultimately just triggering your RAS.
Yeah,
it's like let's just remind you. Let's remind you.
Yeah.
Let's remind you. If you hop in the car, every time you're in the car, you listen to this podcast, or whenever you've got a spare time, this is powerful, and it can just be constantly reminding you of what you should be doing, because we all forget. It's like the rubber band analogy you use. We'll stretch it, but it'll loosen or whatever you say.
I mean, think of let's go back 200 years. What are we doing? We'd be milking cows. We'd be getting the hay together. We'd be picking the corn out of the fields or whatever that is. And so lives were simpler. Think about your headspace 200 years ago. What did you need to think about? Okay, I've got to make some breakfast. I've got to go on the horse.
It's just day by day, wasn't it?
Like super day by day, hour by hour. Now, think about how much is going from here to here within an hour. Think about how much information is going through your brain as you're looking at the phone for 10 minutes. And so our minds are racing so much. Our focus is all over the place. So like you said, connecting to this podcast once a day or once a week, it just gets you refocused. It gets your thoughts realigned with what action steps you want to take, because we're all living busier lives. We're all being far more distracted. Our anxiety is higher. Depression is higher, suicide rates are higher. These are all really negative things because our mind is so clouded. So allow this podcast to be a breath of fresh air for your mindset to, again, cultivate that mentality that's going to serve you in life.
Yeah, awesome. And before, I saw a quote, and it was like, the reason we have coffee and have these drugs is to keep up with how crazy our life is, instead of just connecting with nature like we used to. Obviously, there's a lot of benefits. We have a lot of privilege in this life, but caffeine's a drug. We're having drugs every day just to keep up with the speed, which isn't human. Our brains haven't evolved for this, because it's happened within 100 years, 200 years, so fast. So I'm very excited for this podcast, and I think a lot of good stuff is going to come from it. Hopefully, if people, where should they go? I guess go check out the Facebook page if they're not on there, but otherwise.
Yeah, we're on every social. Just look Empower You with the U. You'll find us. We're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, we're on everything. So stay tuned for more episodes. Excited for what's to come with Empower You podcast.
Sounds great, Brent.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Empower You podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. For more information on our live events, please head to www.empoweryou.com.au. We look forward to having you join us again for the next episode of the Empower You podcast.